As you may know, Shinichirō Watanabe is my favorite animated series creator. I bring this up because I have now seen every one of his series, and as a result, I will be providing a mini review for each of them along with a ranking. I will not be including Macross Plus since it is an OVA and not a full-fledged series. Anyway, let's begin with... I did enjoy this upon initial viewing, but with further reflection, I began to recognize the issues Lazarus has. For one, this series is heavily derivative of Cowboy Bebop both in its story and its characters. The plot is heavily reminiscent of the Cowboy Bebop film in that both it and Lazarus are about humanity's impending doom upon something being released to the public. As for the characters, the protagonist Axel is akin to Spike without being nearly as interesting, Chris is akin to Faye without being nearly as sympathetic, and Elena is akin to Edward without being eccentric and amusing. Jed is the only one I can't see a clear analog of. While I did initially like the characters being analogous to those of Cowboy Bebop, the problem is this causes them to lack any identity of their own aside from being the cast of Cowboy Bebop, but not as good. I also feel this show could have benefited from being longer as it's only 13 episodes. The late Kiko Nomimoto, the head writer for Cowboy Bebop, was slated to be heavily involved in Lazarus, so much so that she would have been credited as co-creator. Had she lived long enough for that, I do think Lazarus may have turned out better. It's not a bad series by any means, but it's weak compared to Watanabe's other works. Next on our list is... So we've got two teenage boys that go by 9 and 12 as they instigate acts of terrorism. If there's one thing I do have to ask, it's what is Terror in Resonance trying to say? Is it that experimenting on children is wrong? The problem is no sane person would disagree with that notion. However, I should acknowledge that despite them being terrorists, the show actually manages to get the viewer to side with them. I believe this works because their motive is to get the public's attention, not to hurt anyone, and it is a cause worth bringing attention to. 9 and 12 do threaten a girl named Lisa into being their accomplice, but that's only because she knew of their identities and they want her compliance. I doubt they had any real intention of hurting Lisa. Does anyone else think she resembles a young Faye Valentine? Other than an indisputable message and some plot points that aren't further addressed, Terror in Resonance is a pretty solid show, and it only gets better from here on out. Unlike the other entries in this ranking, this one stands out because rather than being an original series, it is actually an adaptation of a manga bearing the same name. Of course, I'm talking about Kids on the Slope. Karo Nishimi is an introverted pianist and high school student who's never had the best of luck at making friends on account of moving around a lot. One day at his new school, he meets fellow classmate Sentoro Kawabuchi, a drummer and jazz aficionado who initially comes across as a brute, but there's more to him than meets the eye. The two form a friendship through their mutual classmate Ritsuko Mukai, a childhood friend of Sentoro's and whose father owns the local record store, which Karo frequents regularly. With Karo on the piano and Sentoro on the drums, the bond is further developed as the two play music together in the basement of the music store. Despite this being a period piece set in 1966, Kids on the Slope evokes a sense of timelessness. I would have assumed it was set in the present if I didn't have that prior knowledge. Though Karo and Sentoro come from different walks of life, the two have quite a bit in common beyond their shared love of music, which gives greater meaning to their friendship. If I did have some criticisms, it would be that while Yoko Kanno did a good job with the soundtrack, it's far from her best work, and being a slice-of-life anime, its visuals aren't as appealing as what you'd find in other genres. Otherwise, Kids on the Slope is a slope worth climbing. After watching this series, I'm led to believe it may have inspired one of Watanabe's future works, which we'll get to soon enough. When it comes to ranking videos, one rule I will always have in place is no ties. Each entry must be separate, no matter how close in quality they are. With that said, while I do think Kids on the Slope and this series are neck and neck, I'm going to have to give the edge to Carol and Tuesday. Set on Mars sometime in the future, it follows the musical careers of Carol Stanley and Tuesday Simmons as the two work to make a name for themselves along with their manager Gus Goldman and his friend Roddy. I've mentioned that I'm led to believe Kids on the Slope may have inspired one of Watanabe's future works, and Carol and Tuesday is that work in question. Both have similar premises about two teenage musicians from different walks of life coming together, but with some key differences. Kids on the Slope is set in the past, Carol and Tuesday the future. Kids on the Slope boys, Carol and Tuesday girls. Kids on the Slope jazz, Carol and Tuesday pop. As I've said, the two shows are pretty similar in quality, but here's why I place Carol and Tuesday above Kids on the Slope. I think the big one would be since Carol and Tuesday is set in the future rather than the past, it has the advantage of being more topical by exploring matters that exist in our present, such as social media and artificial intelligence. The former is what the titular duo used to develop a following, a common usage among aspiring entertainers such as myself. The girl's main rival is a child star named Angela Carpenter, who uses AI to write her songs and improve her performance, whereas Carol and Tuesday write their songs themselves and improve with practice. Shinichirō Watanabe had this to say regarding the use of AI.
で、なぜこの情熱が大事かと言いますと、これはね、AI にはないものだからですね。AI に頼まれてもやらないですからね、みんなね。よくね、最近 AI にとって代わられて僕たちの仕事がなくなるんじゃないかという人がやっぱりたくさんいるんですけど、そんなことはやっぱりないと思うんですね。やっぱりエモーションもパッションもない AI にはそんな魅力的な作品を作れないと僕は思っているし。
And he's right. AI creations lack soul and passion because AI is only driven by command. It has no artistic motivation whatsoever. This makes Carol and Tuesday somewhat ahead of its time, as this series was released in 2019, whereas the AI boom didn't begin until late 2022. Aside from that, I prefer the visuals as they're more vibrant, and the soundtrack because while I do enjoy instrumental tracks, I do favor sung tracks as most people do. I also identify a lot with Tuesday as a character, being a shy and reserved introvert much like myself. If I ever come across as outgoing in my videos, I am absolutely not. I may be confident performing in front of an audience, but it is difficult for me to initiate conversations with strangers. If there's anything I wasn't keen on, there are a few characters who have transitioned due to exposure to the Martian environment, which I find hard to believe. I don't have an issue with trans characters in media, but the thing is, medically transitioning is a conscious effort. It's not something that just happens. Also, if the Martian environment can change one's sex, why hasn't it happened to a lot more people? I've read that some have taken issue with the portrayal of LGBT characters, as much of them are negative. Here's why I don't. Members of any demographic consist primarily of good Samaritans. The sexual orientation or gender identity of these characters has no bearing on their morality. Angela's mother Dahlia isn't bad because she's a trans woman. She's bad because she forced Angela into child stardom and holds her to high standards. If you've got a Netflix subscription, I highly recommend giving Carol and Tuesday a watch. It's got a pleasant soundtrack, relatable characters, vibrant visuals, and it even manages to be ahead of its time with its exploration of the usage of AI. Now we're at the top 3. So who gets the bronze medal? This is easily the funniest of all of Watanabe's shows. It's about a dandy guy in space, but you can call him Space Dandy. He travels the galaxy in his ship the Aloha Oi in search of rare or previously unknown alien species. Accompanying him on his adventures are QT, a robot who is by far the most serious about capturing aliens, and Meow, a freeloading cat-like alien called a Beetlejuician. Unbeknownst to them, Dandy is being pursued by the Gogol Empire, but enough about them. This series has an almost completely episodic structure and features negative continuity, meaning anything can happen as it'll be reverted by the next episode. For example, characters can die, only to be alive and well by the next. This allows for a plethora of stories to be told, which Space Dandy takes full advantage of. In just the 4th episode, there's a zombie outbreak that infects the whole universe, including QT, who, as I mentioned, is a robot. Another episode has the characters hopping different dimensions and meeting alternate versions of themselves. and another has the characters attending high school in search of a rare alien, with the episode becoming a full-blown musical. Some viewers may take issue with the presence of fan service in Space Dandy, though it does serve a purpose. It's satirical. The fan service is so outrageous and over the top that it's funny. Dandy's ultimate goal is to visit every restaurant in a chain called Boobies with the intention of one day becoming its proprietor. Dandy is a lustful man, but he's also a pathetic idiot. His objectives often end in failure because he is so easily sidetracked. Since the series is primarily a comedy, Dandy isn't so much meant to be rooted for, but rather laughed at. One gripe I do have is with the character of Meow. While he does provide tips on where to find aliens, they're more often than not worthless, and Danny and QT are the ones that end up doing the bulk of the legwork. I also don't think he contributes to the dynamic of the Aloha Oi. QT does by serving as a foil to Dandy, which is necessary when the protagonist is absent-minded. Meow is not a necessary addition to the cast, and the series would have worked just fine without him. You know what they say, two's company, three's a crowd. Normally I try to avoid discussing spoilers, but for Space Dandy I feel I must. I've mentioned that Dandy is being pursued by the Gogol Empire. This is because Dandy contains a powerful element within him called Pionium that the Gogol Empire seeks to extract. A shockwave ends up destroying the universe save for Dandy himself and the narrator. The narrator reveals himself to be what we refer to as God, offering to make Dandy his successor to a new universe. Dandy declines as he would lack a physical body, leading to the creation of a new universe. I have to say that it is absolutely hilarious that Dandy, of all people, has the capability of becoming a god. It's probably good that he didn't accept considering who he is and what he may have done with that power. If you're a fan of Beavis and Butthead or Johnny Bravo, shows about horny doofuses, you'll be right at home with Space Dandy. I can understand that this show isn't for everyone, but no show is no matter how acclaimed. In second place, the silver medal winner is like a blend of sorts, a mixture of two vastly different but highly skilled swordsmen. You could even call it a Samurai Champloo. Set sometime during the Edo period in Japan, it follows three Japanese teenagers, Mugen, Jin, and Fu, as the three set out on a search for the samurai who smells of sunflowers, otherwise known as the Sunflower Samurai. Mugen and Jin are the aforementioned swordsmen in question, who are disparate not only in their fighting styles, but also their personalities. Jin is stoic and reserved with a formal and refined fighting style, whereas Mugen is crude and hates being told what to do, with a fighting style that is unorthodox and improvised. Despite Mugen and Jin being polar opposites in how they use a blade, they both display proficiency in combat. They each set out to kill each other because Jin is the only opponent Mugen has yet to defeat and vice versa. This is where Fu comes in, a young girl who not only provides the trio the objective of finding the Sunflower Samurai, but also keeps Mugen and Jin from fighting. Fu herself is incapable of putting up a fight, but is proven to be resourceful in other ways. The series is best characterized by its influence from hip-hop culture. Although hip-hop wasn't a thing at this point in history, it blends well with Samurai Champloo's setting and doesn't feel out of place. I believe this works because it fits with the style the anime is going for. While there is an ongoing plot, there are some self-contained episodes as Mugen, Jin, and Fu find themselves in various situations along their travels, and not all of them stick the landing, particularly in the later half of the series. One of these episodes is literally a clip show that can be easily skipped. When a TV series does a clip show, it's when there have been a substantial number of episodes, with the clips themselves fitting a certain theme. The clip show in question is episode 12, meaning it only has 11 episodes to work with. Plus, in this day and age, dedicating an entire episode to showcasing events in past episodes is redundant, as they can easily be found on the internet, including from official sources. Fun fact, Samurai Champloo actually took inspiration from I'm sure the creator of Samurai Jack, Genndy Tartakovsky, was pleased to hear this as he listed Cowboy Bebop as one of his favorite pieces of animation. Anyway, if you're interested in sword fighting, Japanese history, albeit not completely accurate, and hip-hop culture, Samurai Champloo might just be for you. Here we are, the last of Shinichirō Watanabe shows. We've been through some pretty good ones, but which one is the best and the winner of the gold medal, in my opinion? Well, before I tell you that, I've got one thing I need to say. I think it's time we blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay? 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Yeah, it's no surprise that Cowboy Bebop is my favorite Shinichirō Watanabe series, especially since I've established how much I loved it in prior videos. But why is that? Let's find out. Set in the year 2071, in a time where humanity has colonized much of the solar system, it follows a group of bounty hunters searching for the next big score. Our characters include Jet Black, a former police officer who became a bounty hunter with the intent of bringing justice to the solar system, Faye Valentine, a femme fatale with trust issues always looking out for herself, and Edward, a young but brilliant hacker who serves as the hilarious comic relief for the series. While all three of them are great characters, arguably, the best character would have to be the protagonist himself, Spike Spiegel. The man is a walking contradiction. He'll say one thing, but his actions say otherwise. Though small, Cowboy Bebop has one of the most well-written and three-dimensional cast of characters, and that sharp writing extends to the stories as well. The series goes for a mixture of a serialized and episodic approach, excelling at both. Of course, it would be a cardinal sin if I didn't talk about two of Cowboy Bebop's strongest elements, the animation and the soundtrack. Being set throughout the solar system, there is no shortage of visual appeal, whether it be on one of the many inhabited celestial bodies or outer space itself. There's also plenty of action throughout, whether it be hand-to-hand combat, gunfighting, or even with the ships themselves. To say that composer Yoko Kanno did a great job would be an understatement. Even with the best of TV shows, one of my biggest criticisms would have to be their soundtracks. Not that they're bad or anything, it's just that they're nothing special, but they get the job done. That issue is completely absent in Cowboy Bebop as the soundtrack stands out right from the start. Not only fitting with what's being presented, but also impeccable to the point that I want to listen to it even when I'm not watching the show, and I can't say the same for other TV series. Speaking of criticisms, while I think highly of Cowboy Bebop, I do recognize that it's not perfect, though it does come close. It doesn't start off strong, nor does it really get going until the 5th episode. However, I found upon a second rewatch of the series, or third watch overall, that I actually like the first 4 episodes better than upon initial viewing. I also thought the 24th episode should have served as the series finale, but now I concur that episodes 25 and 26 provide a satisfying conclusion. This'll be a hot take, but if there's any criticism I stand by, it would be with Ein. What problem do I have with this corgi, you may ask? Well, it's simple. Ein is not a character. He's supposed to be this illegal experiment with heightened intelligence, but he more or less acts like a regular dog. His only purpose is to keep Edward company while Spike, Jet, and Faye are away. There's a reason he isn't mentioned when critics are discussing the characters in their reviews. In case you're still skeptical that I'm a massive fan of Cowboy Bebop, I'm going to prove you wrong. Aside from the quilt I use as a background as well as my shirt and hat, I also have signed prints from every main English cast member, signed Funko Pops from every main English cast member, the entire main set of figures from First 4 Figures, and I've met every main English cast member in a video meet and greet. What is the difference between your natural speaking voice and Spike's voice?
Not much. It's pretty much my speaking voice. Back in the day, I was younger, so it was a little bit higher. It might have been a little bit higher than my natural speaking voice is now, so I can still do it. I can still hit it. But yeah, it's basically my natural speaking voice. It's one of the very few characters back at that time that I was able to use my natural speaking voice for.
With all that said, Cowboy Bebop isn't one of the best animated series or even one of the best anime. It is one of the greatest TV shows of all time. Every aspect of this series is S tier because when it does something right, it accomplishes it to near perfection. This is the magnum opus of everyone who was ever involved in the production, whether it be director Shinichirō Watanabe, late head writer Keiko Nobumoto, composer Yoko Kanno, both the Japanese and English cast members, and everyone else who brought this series to life. If you haven't already seen Cowboy Bebop, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, so go watch it right away. One thing I can promise is by the end of it, you're going to carry that weight.